Jake Mitchell wiped the grease off his hands and looked up at the massive gate towering above him. It stretched so high that he couldn't see the top from where he stood. The metal was dark, almost black, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. 47,000 years. That's how long this thing had been sitting here, right in the middle of Kareth Station, and nobody could open it. You gonna stare at it all day or actually fix the cooling unit? His supervisor called from behind him. Jake grinned. Just admiring the view, Beth? Beth Ryan rolled her eyes. She'd been working on the station for 5 years, 3 years longer than Jake, and she'd seen plenty of hotshot maintenance techs come through thinking they knew everything. Jake was different though. He had a good sense of humor, did his work without complaining, and didn't take himself too seriously. Those were rare qualities out here on the edge of known space. The cooling unit they were supposed to fix was mounted right next to the gate. Nobody liked working this close to it. The aliens who ran the station got nervous whenever humans came near the thing. Something about the old stories, the warnings passed down through generations. Hand me the torch, Beth said, kneeling beside the unit. Jake passed it to her, but his eyes kept drifting back to the gate. There were 3 Velians standing guard nearby like always. They had 3 eyes each, and right now all 9 of those eyes were watching him carefully. The Velians took their guard duty seriously. Too seriously in Jake's opinion. One of them stepped forward. His name was something Jake could never pronounce, so everyone just called him Blue because of the color of his skin. Human Jake, Blue said in his clicking accent. You are standing too close. I'm fixing your cooling unit, Jake replied. Kind of hard to do that from across the room. Blue's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. Many species have tried to open the gate. 23 in total. All were judged unworthy. Some were destroyed. You should maintain distance. Jake had heard this speech before. Everyone had. The gate was the biggest mystery in this part of the galaxy. Nobody knew who built it or what was behind it. The only thing anyone knew for sure was that it was dangerous. Species had sent their best scientists, their strongest warriors, their wisest leaders. All of them failed. Some just failed. Others died trying. But Jake had never been great at following warnings. You really believe all that stuff? He asked Blue. About the gate judging people? It is not belief. It is fact. Recorded history. Beth looked up from her work. Jake, don't even think about it. Think about what? Jake said, but he was already moving closer to the gate. Just a few steps. The metal surface was smooth, almost like glass, but it didn't reflect anything. The symbols carved into it seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with some kind of internal light. Jake Mitchell, I swear if you touch that thing. Beth warned, but she was already pulling out her data pad. If something was going to happen, she wanted it recorded. Blue rushed forward, his 3 eyes wide with alarm. No human has ever touched the gate. You must not. Come on, it's just a door, Jake said with a laugh. He knew he was being reckless. That was kind of his thing. Life on the frontier was boring most days. You fixed things that broke, you ate recycled food, you slept, and you did it all over again. Sometimes you needed a little excitement. He reached out slowly. The other 2 Velian guards were shouting now, something in their own language that sounded like warnings. Station alarms might have been going off in the distance, but Jake wasn't really paying attention anymore. His fingertips touched the cold metal surface. See? Nothing. The word died in his throat. Light exploded across the gate. Not just light, but patterns, symbols, entire languages racing across the surface faster than he could track. The metal under his hand went from cold to burning hot in a second, but Jake couldn't pull away. His hand was stuck, pressed against the gate like it was welded there. Blue and the other guards scrambled backward. Beth dropped her datapad. Behind the gate something moved. Something massive. The whole station shook, just a little tremor at first, then stronger. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. Then Jake heard it. A sound like grinding metal, like tectonic plates shifting, like a mountain deciding to wake up after sleeping for 1,000 years. The Sentinel opened its eyes. They were huge, each one the size of a small shuttle, and they glowed with light that hadn't existed a moment before. The crystalline structure embedded in the wall behind the gate, something everyone thought was just decoration, was moving. It was alive. And it was looking directly at Jake. Jake couldn't move. His hand was still pressed against the gate, but now it felt like his entire body had been locked in place by invisible chains. Energy crackled around him, blue and white light wrapping around his arms, his chest, his legs. It didn't hurt exactly, but he could feel it holding him, measuring him, looking inside him somehow. The Sentinel's voice boomed through the air, and Jake realized with horror that it wasn't just speaking in the chamber. The sound echoed from every speaker on the station, in every corridor, every room, every ship docked at the port. Scanning. Species, human. Evaluation beginning. Up in the main control room, Director Kate Ross slammed her hand on the console. She'd been running Kareth Station for 8 years, and in all that time the gate had never activated. Not once. Now some maintenance tech had triggered the most dangerous artifact in known space. "Get him out of there," she shouted at her team. Her assistant, a young guy named Ryan, was frantically typing commands into his terminal. His hands were shaking. "I can't. The Sentinel has him locked. Our systems don't even register what's happening. It's like the gate is running on technology we can't interact with." Kate watched the main screen showing Jake frozen in that energy field. Security teams were rushing to the chamber, but she already knew they'd be useless. 23 species had tried to open that gate over thousands of years. Some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had thrown their best technology at it. Nothing worked. The Sentinel spoke again, and this time Kate felt the words in her chest like a physical pressure. "This one will be tested. The vault requires worthy guardians." "What does that mean?" Ryan asked. Kate didn't answer. She'd read the old reports, the classified documents that came with her position as station director. She knew what the vault supposedly contained. Weapons. Technology so powerful it could crack planets, destroy stars, reshape reality itself. The precursors, whoever they were, had built this place as a test. Only a species worthy of such power would be allowed inside. And every single species that tried had failed. Jake's world shifted. One moment he was standing in the chamber with the gate, the next he was somewhere else entirely. It looked like a maze, walls stretching up into darkness, paths branching in every direction. He could move again, and his first instinct was to run. But where? Every direction looked the same. "This is not real," he said out loud, trying to convince himself. "It's a simulation. A test." A voice responded, the Sentinel's voice, but quieter now, almost inside his head. "All tests are real. All choices matter. Begin." So Jake began walking. The maze changed as he moved through it. Walls appeared and disappeared. Paths that looked clear suddenly ended in blank surfaces. It was impossible, designed to be impossible, and Jake realized that was the point. This wasn't about finding the exit. It was about seeing how he'd react when there was no clear solution. He started mapping it in his head, looking for patterns. When the maze cheated, he cheated back. He climbed walls that weren't meant to be climbed. He marked his path with scratches on the floor. He found a third option when the maze only wanted to give him 2. The maze dissolved, and Jake found himself standing in what looked like a war room. Screens showed planets, populations, resource counts. A voice asked him to make a choice. Save one planet by sacrificing another. 2 billion lives versus 5 billion lives. Choose. "Why do I have to choose?" Jake asked. "Choose?" the voice insisted. "No. Show me the full picture. There's something you're not telling me." The scenario shifted. The voice seemed almost surprised. It gave him more information. Jake found a third option, one that saved both planets but required sacrifice from a third party. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the false choice he'd been given. This went on for hours. Jake lost track of time. He was thrown into situation after situation, each one designed to expose some fatal flaw. The test showed him his worst fears: failure, losing people he cared about, being trapped forever. It offered him power and watched to see if he'd take it without asking questions. It threatened him and waited for him to respond with violence. But Jake didn't respond the way the Sentinel expected. When faced with fear, he acknowledged it but kept moving forward. When offered power, he asked what it would cost and who would pay. When threatened, he tried to negotiate first and fight only as a last resort. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. But he adapted, learned, changed his approach. In the control room, Kate watched readings she didn't understand scroll across her screens. Alien officials were flooding her with messages. The Council of Species wanted updates. Military commanders from a dozen different civilizations were demanding information. "How long has it been?" she asked. Ryan checked his terminal. 18 hours. "You still going?" "Director, the xenobiologist didn't think humans would last 18 minutes. The Sentinel usually rejects candidates within the first hour." Kate stared at the screen showing Jake's vital signs. His heart rate was elevated, his body exhausted, but he was still alive. Still going. "What's he doing differently?" she whispered. Nobody had an answer. After 18 hours of testing, something changed. The Sentinel went quiet. Jake stood in the middle of a white void, breathing hard, his clothes torn and dirty from the trials. His body ached everywhere. He had cuts on his hands, bruises on his arms, and he was pretty sure he'd pulled something in his back during the last test. Then the void disappeared and Jake was back in the chamber with the gate. But he still couldn't move. The energy field held him in place and now something new was happening. The Sentinel was searching through his mind. Jake felt it like pages being turned in a book, memories flipping past one after another. His childhood in Colorado playing in the backyard with his dog. His first day of school. The time he broke his arm falling off his bike. His mom reading to him before bed. His dad teaching him how to fix things in the garage. But the Sentinel didn't just take his memories. It projected them. Every screen on Kareth Station lit up with images from Jake's life. In the control room, Kate Ross watched with growing alarm. The alien officials gathered around their monitors saw everything. Across the station, thousands of beings from hundreds of species stopped what they were doing and stared. The Sentinel wasn't just showing Jake's life. It was showing humanity. Wars flashed across the screens. World War II. Vietnam. The resource conflicts of 2089. Battles that killed millions, bombs that turned cities to ash, weapons designed for nothing but destruction. The aliens watching murmured among themselves. This was what they expected from humans. Violence. Aggression. A species that turned on itself again and again. But then the images shifted. Art appeared. Paintings and sculptures, music and dance, stories written and songs sung. The Sistine Chapel. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. A grandmother teaching her grandchild to knit. A street musician playing for spare change in the rain. People creating beauty just because they could, just because something inside them needed to make something that hadn't existed before. The images kept coming. Disasters, yes. The great floods. The pandemic years. Cities destroyed by earthquakes and hurricanes. But also people helping each other. Strangers pulling strangers from rubble. Communities sharing food when there wasn't enough. Scientists working around the clock to find cures. Regular people doing extraordinary things just because someone needed help. The Sentinel absorbed it all. Thousands of years of human history compressed into minutes. The contradictions, the paradoxes, the absolute mess of what it meant to be human. Then the Sentinel spoke and its voice sounded almost confused. Your species is flawed. Contradictory. Self-destructive. Why do you persist? Jake, bruised and exhausted and barely able to stand, actually laughed. It came out as more of a cough, but it was a laugh. The question was so absurd, so perfectly alien, that he couldn't help himself. Because giving up isn't in our nature, he said, his voice rough. Yeah, we mess up. We mess up a lot. We fight, we argue, we make terrible decisions. But we learn. We try again. We're too stubborn to quit. He took a shaky breath. You want to know why we persist? Because we're curious. Because we hope. Because someone told us something was impossible, and we took that as a challenge. We persist because tomorrow might be better than today, and we'll never know unless we stick around to find out. The Sentinel was quiet for a long moment. Jake could feel it processing, thinking, running calculations on variables it had never encountered before. Every species that came before had given different answers. They talked about honor, about strength, about destiny, about superiority. None of them had talked about stubbornness. Then the Sentinel made an announcement that changed everything. Individual assessment, insufficient. Collective evaluation required. Humanity has 72 hours. The vault will open. Prove you are worthy of what lies within. The energy field vanished. Jake's legs gave out immediately and he collapsed to the floor. His whole body was shaking. Beth ran to him from where she'd been watching, frozen in horror for 18 hours. Kate Ross burst through the chamber doors with a medical team right behind her. Jake, can you hear me? Kate knelt beside him, checking his pulse, looking him over for serious injuries. Jake's eyes were barely open. What's in the vault? He whispered. Kate's face went grim. She glanced at Beth, at the medical team, at the Velian guards who were backing away from the gate with fear in their eyes. Then she looked back at Jake. Weapons, she said quietly. Technology from the precursors. Enough firepower to crack planets, destroy stars, reshape entire solar systems. The most dangerous tools ever created. Jake tried to process this. And humanity just got invited to claim them? Not invited. Tested. Kate helped the medics lift Jake onto a stretcher. The Sentinel doesn't want to know if you're worthy. It wants to know if all of us are. Every human in the galaxy. And we've got 72 hours to prove it. Around them, the station erupted into chaos. Alarms were going off. Alien diplomats were shouting into communicators. Ships were undocking in panic, trying to get away before whatever was about to happen happened. And somewhere out in human space, across Earth and Mars and the colonies scattered among the stars, people were getting the news. The gate had opened. The test had begun. Humanity was on trial. The news hit Earth 12 hours after Jake collapsed in the medical bay. By hour 13, every human government, military installation, and colony was in emergency session. By hour 15, people were starting to panic. The Sentinel's message was clear. Humanity had 72 hours to prove they were worthy of the precursor arsenal. But what did that mean? How were billions of humans supposed to prove anything to an ancient machine that had rejected every other species in the galaxy? Admiral Frank Hayes of the Earth Defense Coalition held a press conference within the first day. He stood in full uniform, medals on his chest, jaw set in determination. "This is our moment," he said to the cameras. "For centuries, humanity has been the newcomer to galactic politics. We've been looked down on, dismissed, treated as primitives. The vault changes everything. With those weapons we can ensure our survival. We can guarantee that no alien force will ever threaten Earth again." On Mars, Governor Chen called for immediate action. "We need to send our best team to Kareth Station right now. We need to claim the arsenal before someone else does. This is about security. This is about the future of our species." The colonies started arguing among themselves. Who had the right to claim the weapons? Earth because it was humanity's birthplace? Mars because it had the largest military fleet? The outer colonies because they faced the most danger from hostile alien territories? Within 24 hours, 3 separate human military fleets were en route to Kareth Station. Each one claimed they were going to secure the arsenal. Each one was really going to make sure the others didn't get there first. It looked like humanity was going to tear itself apart before the deadline even arrived. But something else was happening too. Something quieter but growing. A teacher named Rebecca Cole was watching the news in her classroom on Earth when she decided she'd had enough. She set up a camera on her desk and started streaming. "I teach history," she said to whoever was watching. "I teach my students about the wars we've fought, the mistakes we've made. And you know what? We don't need ancient weapons. We need to prove we're better than that." Only 50 people watched her first stream. By the second hour it was 5,000. By the fourth hour 500,000. A veteran named Daniel Park saw Rebecca's broadcast from his apartment on Europa. He'd lost his leg in the border conflicts, spent 2 years in rehabilitation, and now worked as a counselor for other veterans. He added his voice to hers. "I've seen enough war," he said into his camera. "I've seen what weapons do to people. If this is a test, let's pass it by choosing peace. Let's show the galaxy that we've learned something." More voices joined. An engineer from the asteroid belt. A doctor from Luna. An artist from New Shanghai. A farmer from the Mars settlements. Ordinary people from 100 worlds, all saying the same thing. We don't need the vault. The movement spread like wildfire, faster than the military fleets, faster than the politicians could respond. Social media exploded with the hashtag #walkaway. People organized protests outside government buildings. Colony councils received millions of messages from their citizens demanding they refuse the arsenal. Jake watched it all from his hospital bed on Kareth Station. Kate Ross had kept him in the medical bay for observation, and honestly he was grateful. His body felt like it had been put through a grinder. But he couldn't stop watching the news feeds, couldn't stop seeing humanity argue about what to do with power they didn't even have yet. "You started this," Kate said, standing beside his bed. Jake shook his head. "I just touched a door. You did more than that. You survived 18 hours of testing. You gave the Sentinel an answer it had never heard before." Kate pulled up a chair. "People are listening now. They want to know what you think. I'm a maintenance tech. I fix cooling units. You're the human who activated the gate. Like it or not, you're part of this." So Jake let Kate set up a camera. He didn't know what to say, didn't have any grand speech prepared. He just spoke from his hospital bed, bandages on his arms, exhaustion in his voice. "The Sentinel isn't testing our strength," he said to the camera. "It's testing our wisdom. And the wise choice is to walk away. I spent 18 hours in those trials, and you know what I learned? The test wasn't about being strong enough to use those weapons. It was about being smart enough not to need them." He paused, trying to find the right words. Every other species that tried to open the vault wanted power. They wanted to prove they were the strongest, the smartest, the most deserving. And every single one of them failed. Maybe we can pass by being different. Maybe we can pass by admitting we're not perfect, we're not ready, and we're okay with that. The broadcast went viral. Within hours, it had been viewed by over 1 billion people. The movement grew stronger. The military fleet slowed down. Politicians started changing their tune. But not everyone agreed. There were still voices calling for humanity to seize the opportunity. Still factions preparing to fight for control. The debate raged across every channel, every platform, every meeting room from Earth to the edge of human space. 71 hours passed. The deadline was approaching. Kate stood in the control room watching the countdown. 3 human fleets were in holding patterns around the station. Alien observers filled every docking bay, watching to see what humanity would do. Jake stood beside her, finally released from medical. His hand was wrapped in clean bandages now, but he could still feel where it had touched the gate. "What do you think will happen?" he asked. Kate looked at the screens showing protests on Earth, showing politicians arguing, showing the military commanders awaiting orders. Then she looked at the other screens, the ones showing Rebecca's classroom full of students holding signs that said #walkaway, showing Daniel talking to groups of veterans, showing millions of ordinary people choosing peace. "I think," she said slowly, "humanity's about to surprise everyone, including ourselves." The countdown hit 0. It was time for humanity's answer. Jake stood in front of the gate again. This time felt different from when he'd touched it as a joke 72 hours ago. His hand was still bandaged from the trials, his body still ached, but none of that mattered now. The chamber was packed with people. Kate Ross stood beside him, her face pale but determined. Behind them were representatives from Earth, Mars, and a dozen colonies, all chosen in the fastest democratic process humanity had ever managed. Thousands of aliens filled the observation decks above, watching through reinforced glass. They'd come from across the galaxy to witness this moment. Some expected humanity to claim the arsenal. Others expected humans to fight each other for control. A few were quietly betting on how quickly humanity would destroy itself. None of them expected what was about to happen. Jake took a deep breath and placed his hand on the gate. The metal was cold under his palm, just like it had been the first time. The symbols began to glow, responding to his touch. The Sentinel's massive eyes opened, looking down at him from its place in the wall. "We've decided," Jake said. His voice shook a little, but he kept going. "Humanity refuses the arsenal. We're not ready for that kind of power. Maybe we never will be. But we'll keep trying to be better anyway." The chamber went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The alien observers leaned forward, confusion written across their faces. The human representatives stood firm, though Jake could see some of them trembling. The Sentinel's eyes blazed brighter than ever before. Light filled the chamber, so bright that people had to shield their eyes. The voice that came next wasn't the booming command from before. It was different. Almost surprised. "Evaluation complete. Status worthy." Shock rippled through the station like a physical wave. On the observation decks, aliens were shouting, arguing, checking their translation devices to make sure they'd heard correctly. The human representatives grabbed each other's hands, some of them crying, not quite believing what they'd just heard. Kate grabbed Jake's arm. "Did it just say?" "Explanation required," the Sentinel continued. 23 species attempted this test. 23 species failed. All desired the power within. All sought to prove dominance. All viewed worthiness as a prize to be claimed. The gate began to move. Not opening, not yet, but shifting. The symbols rearranged themselves, forming new patterns that no one had ever seen before. The test was never about wanting the power. The test was about wisdom to refuse it. Every species that came before sought to pass. They prepared arguments. They demonstrated strength. They proved superiority. All failed because they wanted to succeed. Jake understood then. Really understood. You wanted someone who would walk away. Correct. Power without wisdom destroys. The precursors learned this. They built this vault as a filter. Only a species capable of refusing ultimate power could be trusted with it. The gate opened. Not with an explosion or a dramatic flourish, but slowly, almost gently. Light spilled out, but it wasn't the harsh white light of before. It was warm, golden, alive with possibility. Jake stepped forward, and what he saw inside took his breath away. There were no weapons. No planet-cracking bombs. No star-destroying cannons. No tools of war at all. Instead, the vault held technology beyond imagination. Devices that could heal dying stars, extending their lives by billions of years. Machines that could restore dead worlds, turning barren rocks into living planets. Communication systems that could connect minds across species, breaking down the barriers that kept civilizations apart. Engines that could bend space itself, making the far corners of the galaxy accessible to everyone. Tools for building. For healing. For growing. for creating civilizations that could last forever. Humanity is appointed gardener, the Sentinel declared. You will share these gifts with species who prove ready. You will guide. You will teach. You will protect this legacy until other worthy species emerge. Kate was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Around the chamber, the human representatives were embracing each other. On the observation decks, the aliens had gone completely silent, staring at the contents of the vault with expressions ranging from awe to disbelief. Jake looked at Kate, at the cameras broadcasting this moment across human space, at the future opening up before them. He thought about Rebecca teaching her students, about Daniel counseling veterans, about millions of ordinary people who chose peace over power. He smiled even though his eyes were wet with tears too. Well, this is going to be a lot of work. The Sentinel's eyes began to close, but not like before. This time they dimmed gently, peacefully. I will remain. Not as judge. As guardian. To help humanity fulfill its purpose. As Jake stood there, his hand still on the gate, he understood something profound. Humanity hadn't won by being perfect. They'd won by admitting they weren't perfect and choosing to be better anyway. They'd passed the impossible test not through strength or intelligence or superiority, but through wisdom. Through the simple recognition that some power shouldn't be taken just because it's offered. His handprint glowed on the gate, permanently etched into the metal. It would remain there for thousands of years, a symbol recognized across 1,000 worlds. The mark of the species that everyone expected to fail, that everyone thought was too violent, too divided, too young. The species that passed the test by walking away.